Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Catherine. I'm from Natural Mom Hub, and I'm very excited about tonight's hangout with Justina Thompson from Nourish Fertility. Welcome, Justina.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So, Justina, can you just start by telling us how you got into this type of work?
Sure, absolutely. It's not something that I thought about when I was a kid, and you think about what am I going to grow up and do with my life? When I was looking into birth control options with my fiance, he mentioned that he didn't, prefer that I used a birth control pill. And I said, what else is there? What are you talking about? The birth control pill is the only effective thing out there. Do you want to get pregnant right away? And he said, no, but maybe there's something else out there that isn't hormonal. And I thought he was crazy for even suggesting it. And so I started doing some research and looking into some options. And that's when I came across the book Garden of Your Fertility by Katie Singer. And she basically walks through how to chart. And as I read through the book, I thought, no way, there's no way this is going to be something for birth control to actually prevent pregnancy. So I started charting, and almost to prove the book wrong, actually. And within about 1 month, I realized, wow, I have these amazing, beautiful, juicy fertility signs that actually are different a little bit every day and do show a pattern. And within 2 to 3 months, I knew that I could continue charting and that it could be effective for birth control. So that was, for me, that was a big part of what got me into learning how to become a certified teacher.
And now you've been training people across the country on how they can also kind of learn and interpret their fertility signs, and use this method too.
Absolutely, yeah. So eventually I found a certification program because I wanted to make sure that I got all the training that I needed to professionally teach other people around the world how to chart their fertility, to get pregnant or to avoid pregnancy, because a little bit can go into it. And also how to be able to clinically read charts that people bring to me. So once I did that 2-year certification and internship, then I've been working with women definitely ever since.
Wow, that's great. So tonight, can you walk us through just some of the basics, maybe for people who are brand new to this whole idea that we can actually kind of talk to our bodies or at least read our bodies? Maybe you can kind of just introduce some of the basics.
Absolutely. So women are amazing in every way. And in particular, women's bodies have signs of fertility throughout their cycle. So women have cervical fluid, and that's a fluid that secretes from the cervix through the vagina and out onto their underwear. And that kind of follows a pattern that shifts throughout the cycle. Women also have fluctuations in their basal body temperature. That's when women wake up in the morning. The very first temperature that they have before they get out of bed is their basal body temperature. And before a woman ovulates, it's somewhere in a cluster of low temperatures. And after a woman ovulates, it rises and stays high in a cluster of high temperatures until her next cycle starts. There's also the cervix, which is a beautiful body part that we don't always get to become familiar with in this society. We don't always learn about the cervix, but the cervix also changes positions throughout the cycle. So anyone who's interested in just first and foremost maintaining their own reproductive and gynecological health might be interested in charting so that they can monitor what's going on down there and go to a health practitioner sooner rather than later when they notice something is outside the variation of their normal. And then there's people who are interested in charting these signs for getting pregnant. So the actual number one first best thing any couple can do who says, you know what, I think we're ready to start trying, or wow, like we've been trying for a while and we're not still seeing a pregnancy happen, what's going on? The very first best thing is for a woman to start charting those fertility signs I just mentioned, because it's going to pinpoint when she's actually fertile and help closely pinpoint when she's ovulating. And so that helps a couple actually target the best time to plan intercourse. So that it's not a blind having a baby making time every night of the month for, however many months. So then there are people who are just sick and tired of using their birth control that has hormones in it. Maybe it's a hormonal IUD, maybe it's a hormonal birth control pill or a patch or a shot. More and more women around the world are standing up and saying, I'm noticing XYZ symptoms while I'm taking this birth control, and I didn't have these symptoms before I started. And so there's this really awesome sort of grassroots movement that's been going on for the past few years where women are talking about this with other women and with their doctors and saying, I don't like how I feel on this. So we have about 51% of women right now across the country will discontinue the birth control pill because they have a variety of side effects from it. So this is a great method for people who are either interested in never getting on birth control or are in the same boat as those 51% women in the United States and want to get off of birth control pill.
So you said something really interesting. You said outside of the range of their normal. So even though there's like books and you're teaching this method, I mean, we're still individuals, right? And there's still kind of our own and learning what's normal for us throughout a whole cycle.
Absolutely, Catherine. That's a great point. So even though there's a couple of books out there that specifically teach women how to chart their fertility, or even though there's tons of websites or articles doctors might send us to read about what's normal cycles, what's normal fertility, that doesn't mean that every woman has that perfect magical textbook cycle that we see in these books or we hear about from doctors. So something that's really cool is once a woman starts charting and has at least 3 fertility charts, she can look at that with someone like me who's a teacher, and we can look at what their normal is.
Mm-hmm. So you also mentioned like the move away from hormonal birth control, and I definitely went through that, going off the pill in preparation of one day wanting to get pregnant.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that transition and like what's happening in our bodies? How long does it take us to kind of normalize? Because I think that's a big question too. It's like, well, I just got married. Should I get off the pill now or should I wait? And that timing can be really tricky.
Yes, that's so true. In fact, a lot of the questions that I get from new clients happen to be, when do I go off the pill? How soon can I start charting while still staying on the pill, and things like that. So first and foremost, the transition to stop hormonal birth control is a bit of a journey. So we like to say it's a marathon, not a sprint, because there are a few factors, and I'll try to count them as I say them off, that will determine how long it will take a woman to return back to her natural fertility after stopping the pill. So again, in this situation, every woman, it's going to be a little bit different. Just because so-and-so's friend got ovulatory cycles back in 1 month doesn't mean that their cousin is going to get them back in 1 month. It might take much longer. And so factors that determine that for an individual woman are how long was she on hormonal birth control pill before deciding to stop? Was it 1 year? Was it 10 years? So the hormonal birth control is actually has an accumulative effect. And so those the synthetic hormones that are in these birth controls are something that the body doesn't necessarily know how to digest or detox on its own. And so there can be an accumulative buildup and effect. So it can take just a little bit more time for someone who's been on the pill a lot longer to return back to ovulatory cycles than someone who was on it for a shorter amount of time. But of course, with the amazing body that we each get to have, there are a lot of natural treatments and therapies that you can do as a woman who had been on birth control for a very long time to support the body to return back to that natural ovulatory cycle a lot faster. So good news for everyone. And then another factor would be what type of birth control, so hormonal birth control was it? Was it an IUD? Was it a pill or a shot? And also, what was the woman's ovulatory health, menstrual health, reproductive health? What state was that in before she got on the pill? So those are the major factors. Oh, I can't hear you. There we go. Oh, wait. Try one more time.
Now?
Yes.
Sorry. So it sounds like that can also be a super individual kind of journey, like you said. Does the hormonal birth control suppress our natural signs? Like, can you even chart? I mean, I remember being on the pill and it was like 28 days, super, I actually called it robotic because it wasn't even really regular. It was just kind of like, you know, always the same. I remember when I went off the pill, noticing fluid, like, you know, just after years and years and years of kind of being in like a blah state. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just curious about like the impact of the pill. Obviously, people are wanting to move away from that for a reason. And I just wondered if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the synthetic hormones in hormonal birth control are 2 to 3 times stronger than if you were to measure and compare side by side the strength of our natural hormones. And so those do override our natural fertility signs. So the answer to the question is yes and no. So people who are on hormonal birth control can absolutely chart their cycles for information, but not for accurate birth information to get pregnant or avoid pregnancy. So what they would be charting would be the type of experience you had where it's looking very orchestrated, very planned out, very following a very special order of things. So when women are on hormones for birth control, they're actually not experiencing a true menstruation every cycle. What they're experiencing is breakthrough bleeding that is caused by, if it's the birth control, for example, spending a week of taking the placebo pill at the end of the packet, where what the body is experiencing is from having these 2 to 3 times surge in hormones to having no hormones for 7 days. That causes the body to have a breakthrough bleeding. And so it's actually not a true menstruation. So that's another example of how it's not necessarily a woman's natural fertility that she's charting, but that sort of a syndicated, man-made cycle. But I do always tell my clients who are on the pill to start charting now, today, and watch your body transition throughout the process of stopping the pill, and definitely chart your body's transition to return back to ovulatory cycles. Because it's amazing information for educators like myself, but it's also really helpful insight into how a woman's body is transitioning if she needs extra natural support to get through that.
Mm-hmm. Great. So let's see, what are some of the objectives? Like, I know a lot of the things I've read about fertility awareness try to differentiate it from like other, I don't want it like the rhythm method or other ways of kind of preventing pregnancy that maybe aren't as reliable as this method, which takes into account, 3 factors. What are some of the other kind of, I don't know, things that you hear where people are like, kind of skeptical about how this is going to work for them?
Sure. Yeah, I can explain. I can break it down for you really easily. I always like to ask people that I meet or I'm teaching in a class, who knows someone who used the natural birth control and it didn't work and they got pregnant. And a lot of people raise their hands and say, I know someone who used natural birth control. I know someone it didn't work. And so I like to say, always find out whoever's going to tell you this information, natural birth control doesn't work. Always ask them, what type of natural birth control were you using? And were you using it correctly? So just like someone with the pill who gets pregnant while taking the pill, okay, like, were you taking it every day at the same time every day according to what's effective? And if not, okay, so it's not the pill's fault. that a person got pregnant accidentally. It was the user's risk that they took. So there's like an umbrella, if I can put a little umbrella over me, that is fertility awareness-based methods. So that's the term. And under that umbrella are 4 categories. So we have the rhythm method category, where people are counting and predicting when their fertile window is going to happen. So that would mean a doctor says, hi, you menstruate on day 1 and you ovulate on day 14, so don't have sex on day 13, 14, or 15. That would be the rhythm method, where someone's just counting out on the calendar those days. That is only 50% effective. So in our books, right, not effective at all. And that's because women's bodies aren't predictable that way. There are things in the environment like stress and travel that can impact us ovulating sooner or much later than that sort of average day 14 that doctors like to refer to. And then we have cervical fluid only methods. And this is a person who's charting just cervical fluid. So this is really popular with some of the natural family planning methods in the Catholic Church. So we have the Creighton model, for example, where they're just charting cervical fluid. And that has a pretty high effectiveness rate, about 98% when used correctly. And then we have the temperature only method. This is people who don't look at their cervical fluid, but they just chart their temperature every morning. And this has a really high effectiveness rate of about 99% when used correctly. But remembering that this is only allowing people to use the last chunk of their cycle for unprotected intercourse and not getting to use anything in the first part. And that's part of why the effectiveness is so much higher, is because it's a more limited amount of a window for couples. And then we have the method that I teach called the Fertility Awareness method, or FAM for short. And this uses both cervical fluid and temperature to cross-check each other. And so that increases the effectiveness rate up to 99.4 to 99.7% effective when used correctly.
That is such a huge difference in the numbers, and I having charted a little bit myself, I can appreciate what you're saying about kind of checks and balances.
Yes.
And making sure that just because your temperature or your fluid's telling you one thing, you still have other ways to kind of verify, I guess,
exactly
what's going on. So I guess what about maybe some common stumbling blocks for people that are kind of learning, or just time is obviously a huge factor, it sounds like, in this, just kind of training ourselves to kind of know what is normal and how long is my cycle. I think that's another thing that really surprised me when I went off the pill. It's like, well, I actually don't have a 28-day cycle. I have a 31-day cycle, and so what does that mean? So maybe you can share with us just like some of your clients' experiences kind of adopting this and things that they're, I don't know, how to figure out for themselves.
Sure, that's a great topic. So my clients who choose to use the fertility awareness method are pretty much at a point where they're really interested in taking the time up front that it takes to learn the method, which is, first of all, just taking a class with a teacher, and then second of all, charting for 3 months before reviewing those charts with the teacher, and then kind of springboarding into using the method as birth control for a typical ovulatory person. And that is time commitment up front, in our society, where our conventional medical system says, hey, come to the doctor's office, wait at the doctor's office for 45 minutes, spend 5 minutes with the doctor, get your prescription to have a pill that's going to take care of everything, and just take that once a day. That's kind of what's ingrained in a lot of us, the majority of our Western culture. It was ingrained in me growing up, obviously, because I thought, what else is there other than the pill? And so getting outside of that box and thinking, what is important to me as an individual. So for some people, they might be in a place where something like the birth control pill is best for them, and they get to have all the informed consent information that they need to make that decision, just like someone who might make the informed consent decision that the fertility awareness method is the best for them at whatever phase they are in their life. And so it does require the time it takes to take a class up front, and then 3 months of charting before actually deciding with your teacher to move forward with the method as your primary birth control. And then that learning time relying on barrier methods. Now, for someone who is new to charting, like a lot of my clients, it sounds like, wow, like this is like is this like going back to school? Like how involved is this learning phase? It's actually not very involved at all. In fact, checking cervical fluid and checking the temperature in the morning just takes as long as it does to brush your teeth every day. So it's just adding in just a different step to your day, just like you're gonna brush your teeth twice a day. You're gonna brush your teeth twice a day, check your cervical fluid when you go to the bathroom. And so it's actually ends up not being very time consuming when you break it down to a little bit of time each day. And so then for people who are on birth control or have recently stopped birth control, the time it takes to be able to rely on this method for primary birth control can be a little bit longer, because the transition to get back to that reliable ovulatory information can be a little bit longer. So we like to ask clients who have recently come off the pill or are going to come off the pill to chart 6 typical cycles before they rely on the method for birth control. So then during that time, the couple would be relying on barrier methods. So there's a lot of pros and cons for people to consider if the fertility awareness method makes sense for them and is right for them at this time. And then those who do decide it's right for them actually do most of the learning right up front and then spend time just charting their cycles. If they have a question, I'm a fertility coach, so you get to shoot me a text message. I have clients send me little video clips of their cervical fluid checks to check in and say, what is this? Which one is this? And so you have access to a coach who is here to help you along the way. Feel confident about what you're learning so that you can feel like you've learned it a lot faster. Oh, it's on mute.
Oops. Okay. Sorry, Justina.
Okay. I know. It's like, which button is it?
Yeah, well, I'm trying not to like cough in your ear and stuff like that too. So I guess a lot of our listeners obviously are moms already. And I guess I wondered if we could talk a little bit about just maybe how some of this changes like after baby. I know you've taught classes exclusively on this, like if you're a breastfeeding mom, what are some of the things you need to be considering? But maybe if you could just allude to some of that. So I know for me, even though I charted before my first, I was really nervous trying to go back to just charting after she was born because I felt like I was all out of whack, so I probably could have used like a 3-month example and showed it to somebody and say, okay, like, where am I now? Am I the same as I was before having a baby? Because in some ways I don't think that that's the case. So.
No, I completely understand. There's quite a bit of a transition time for women postpartum as well, especially women who are breastfeeding, where their bodies, women who are breastfeeding, every time that baby suckles at the breast, prolactin is being released into her body, which is actually suppressing ovulation. And saying, you know what, body, we're feeding baby, we're doing this for however many months or years, and we don't need to necessarily return to ovulatory cycles right now because we're focusing on baby and you. But it is a myth that you can't get pregnant while breastfeeding. So this comes down to where each woman's experience is really individual. And so while a woman could read a book or read an article, the best thing is to talk to a fertility coach to help her understand what her transition is going to look like back to ovulatory cycles after she's finished or postpartum. And so actually, a big fact for women is that it is a little bit more work to learn how to chart fertility for birth control after you've had a baby if you've never charted before that pregnancy. It can be a little bit more work, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible. The majority of breastfeeding clients I have, I'm teaching how to chart for the first time. And so we just approach it understanding that while a woman is breastfeeding, fertility is much more ambiguous than she's going to see once her body switches back to typical cycles. And so what that just means is taking fertility into account one day at a time and answering the question, am I fertile today? Yes or no, at the end of every day. So knowing your fertility at the end of every day instead of the alternative, and knowing that a couple might be relying on barrier methods more frequently during that ambiguous postpartum phase than they will once typical cycles return back. And just being, again, weighing the pros and cons for each person as whether to how, are we wanting to have a baby in the next 12 months after this baby we just had? If we're really not, what are our choices for birth control? And unfortunately for breastfeeding women right now, the options are a low-dose progesterone pill, which is a hormonal pill, or an IUD, a hormonal IUD, or barrier methods. And so right now, the information, the research, the technology out there isn't giving postpartum women, breastfeeding women, a lot of options for birth control that can be natural. So charting fertility signs in addition with relying on barrier methods when a day is potentially fertile can be a huge plus for some women over the alternatives.
So I wanted to ask you about some of the apps. I know when I first started charting, I did chart on paper just to kind of, I don't know if the patterns were easier for me to see that way or something, but now there are so many great apps that help us kind of interpret the rules, and it's so convenient because a lot of us are kind of sleeping with our phones right by our beds anyway, so you can take that temperature and just put it in your phone. So I don't know, as an expert and as a teacher, do you have an opinion about how much technology we should be using to support this?
I have a huge opinion. So, there is really one. So if you get on your phone, you go to App Store and you search fertility tracker, you'll find maybe 100 apps come up. And a lot are much more popular than others. But I don't recommend any of them except potentially one, and it's called Kindara. And the only reason I recommend Kindara, it's the only app on the market right now that does not predict a woman's fertile window. So we talked about the rhythm method being only 50% effective because it predicts and says, you're going to ovulate on day blank because you ovulated on day blank for the last month or 2 or 3 or 4. And women's bodies, unfortunately, we don't work that way. We don't ovulate based on what happened in the last 12 months. We ovulate based on what's happening right now. Are we stressed? Are we traveling? Are we sick? Are we waking up throughout the night constantly? And so it's the apps that predict should not be used for birth control. They can be really helpful for women who are trying to get pregnant. And so with Kindara, if you want to download it on your phone, it's free. And if a woman is using it to get pregnant, she just selects that option at the very start of the app, and that will predict ovulatory cycles if she's trying to get pregnant. But then the other side of it is women who are not trying to get pregnant, they just choose avoiding pregnancy, and then they get to see when their fertile window happens in real time without an app trying to calculate when it's going to happen for them. I'm a big, huge nerd. I'm a fan of paper charting, and I'm green, and so it's unique because I'm paperless in every other way until it comes to my fertility charts. So I actually keep, like the fabulous nerd that I am, I keep a 3-ring binder. I get like a cute one, and I print out my charts, and I keep them, and I love just like flipping through and being able to like put my finger and kind of like draw, like go across and look at the different lines and look at, oh, what happened last time? Let's compare it to this time. And so not all women are into that, but if they are, I like to encourage my clients to go with paper just for their charts, because it can be really fun if a person's been charting for 10 years and they have a binder of their reproductive history. Or, you know, fertility history health. It's like their own personal medical record that no one else can duplicate. So it can be a pretty cool thing. That said, the Kandara app stores digital charts as well. And I just remembered just talking about what are some factors that could apply to charting for breastfeeding women that may be a little bit more of a stumbling block. It helps in order to get a good temperature when women do their basal body temperature in the morning. A woman needs to have had at least 3 hours of consecutive sleep. So that's one example that not new moms get to have, or even moms with toddlers all the time. So we cater the fertility charting information specifically to moms who don't have that type of lifestyle that they may have had before pregnancy. And so there's little details like that we can kind of specialize in and modify for new moms so that the charting process doesn't add more stress to their life.
I can imagine. I mean, I remember the early days, where you're nursing all night. And so it's like, well, I don't know what my body is telling me right now, but right. I'm glad you debunked that myth about, breastfeeding being birth control just in and of itself. Because certainly that, there's plenty of people that are breastfeeding through a second baby. So right. We know that that's not really true. Yeah. So this is kind of just like a big picture philosophical question for you. Cause some of what I've read about the pill is like, why do we have so few options? And like, how many years ago was the pill even invented? And how little innovation has there been kind of in this area? So I was just wondering if you had any, obviously you're green, you're natural, you want to go that route anyway, and encourage women to be more in touch with their bodies and really understanding what their normal is. But we do have pretty limited options, right? That's true.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fun, conversation to explore. So it's just historically, even since, the early 1900s and before that, female bodies, female health has been sorely under-researched and blatantly ignored. And even when you look at today or the last 5 years of health research, the minority of research that's taking place, women are the minority of research that's taking place for their health. And that includes contraception as well. A big player in natural contraceptive research and technology was the Catholic Church, interestingly enough, because when the Catholic Church decided that they wanted to tell their followers not to use condoms or birth control pill, not to prevent reproduction, they needed an alternative for their followers. Like, what are they going to use if the Catholic Church is going to tell them don't use condoms and don't use birth control? Then how can they help these families plan around so that they're not struck with 3 children in 3 years or something like that? And so the Catholic Church actually, over the last few decades, has put tons of money and research into these fertility awareness-based methods and helped develop them over the years to become what the fertility awareness method is today, which is as effective as the birth control pill. And so that's something I love to recognize and appreciate, because they were putting research into women's health that no other sector was. And so that's been really beneficial to women's health in general. And a lot of research has gone into breastfeeding women and natural birth control as well that no other sector was putting into. And so while I teach secular and I'm not part of the Catholic Church, I love that, hey, here's a group that was putting money there even when our other medical societies were not. So we do have the option of now the non-hormonal IUD, and that's called a copper IUD. And the mechanism of how that works is a little bit blurred. Apparently, the copper wire around the IUD is said to basically like deter sperm, and like instead of sperm getting through to potentially fertilize an egg, like sperm turning around and going the other way. But then the other part of how the IUD might work is because it's in the uterus, and so it causes the uterus to not be a hospitable environment if an egg is fertilized and tries to move down into the uterus to implant. But that can be a really effective method for women who decide that they need to use it for however long in their life. But it's something to consider, do the research on, and consider the risks of having an IUD put in, the statistics of women who have issues right after it's put in, or extreme heavy bleeding the whole time it's in. So even though it's non-hormonal, when it's the copper IUD, there's still health implications that are impacting a woman's overall quality of living, and that she has to consider.
It's still a foreign object, right?
Exactly. It's a foreign object surgically put into the uterus. And so it's interesting. It's it can not feel natural. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There is some technology being worked on right now that's getting a lot of press, and it's basically a cement for men that gets injected into the tip of the penis to prevent any sperm from being removed during ejaculation. And so it's being coined, like, I think maybe they're calling it the male, the first male birth control that involves a procedure. And
wow.
It's supposedly reversible. So let's say a man decides later on in life he does want to help contribute to the life of a child, that can be reversed. So again, we have to look at the technology and the research and say, okay, yay for men who want to take on the burden of putting their body through a non-natural birth control process, but then also, like, what's our technology doing? We keep coming up with synthetic ways to prevent birth control. Imagine how much more we could learn if we focused on natural ways to continue preventing pregnancy. So, or at least non-chemical ways.
Mm-hmm. So in your practice, Justina, are you helping mostly women achieve pregnancy or avoid?
Actually, I feel like it's pretty balanced, an equal amount of both. I have women who come to me, or individuals even, who come to me to get pregnant. Maybe they've been trying for a few months or for a couple of years, or maybe they're preparing for IUI, intrauterine insemination, and want to target that time, the best time to go in for that. And then I also have an equal amount of women who are just fed up with the lack of birth control options that actually put women's health first, and a woman's quality of life first, and decide that the fertility awareness method is going to be the best route to feel their best and prevent having children. So, and then my favorite thing, I love to talk to colleges. So I'll go to colleges, or, locally, or I'll Skype in. And I love to do little intro classes about how important fertility is for women, whether they want babies or not. So throughout the reproductive years, nourishing fertility is actually such a huge part of a woman feeling vibrant, and even more phenomenal than she's ever felt before. So, fertility charting is a great way to have insight into things that might be causing her to have, fatigue or energy issues, or lack of concentration or focus, or depression or anxiety. And so once we look at a woman's overall fertility health and start putting things in that are nourishing that, whether she wants babies or not, she starts to feel her best. And so that's a whole nother side of fertility charting as well.
I love how you mentioned, women that are undergoing fertility treatments as a good candidates to really understand like when their ideal windows are, because I think that group of women can also really just feel kind of disenchanted with what their bodies are doing or not doing, and so that must be exciting for you to get to work with them and kind of encourage them to it's kind of like figuring out a puzzle almost, like putting it together. So recently I posted on my blog a personal experience of trying to use the ovulation strips.
Yes.
And it was horrible. It was, for me, it was I never got the signs on those strips that I wanted to. And I wish that I had just relied on my own fertility signs and just trusting my body to tell me what was going on, because according to those strips, I didn't ovulate that whole cycle. And who knows if I really did or didn't, because I wasn't like as diligent about charting, because I had these strips. I was like, well, I'll just use these strips. A lot of people are using these strips. And it was really hard to not know what was going on. And I just felt really disconnected. Because I think one thing that FAM provides is like a way for us really to tune in. So I don't know if you've heard anything anecdotally, or you have opinions on the ovulation predictor strips. And actually I posted on Facebook, and a lot of other moms said that some had good experiences and were able to get pregnant using them. And others said, yeah, that was a lot of peeing in cups for no reason.
Yeah. So yeah, I hear similar feedback, and my clients who have used them for getting pregnant have similar feedback as well. It's a toss-up. They either seem to really confirm what a woman's fertility signs are showing, or completely confuse the crap out of what her fertility signs are showing. So OPKs, which is ovulation predictor kits, they're expensive. They add up. So a woman's essentially peeing on this, on the strip every day for several days, if not two or 3 weeks, depending on how much she's tuning into her fertility cycle, to know when to start peeing on them. And so it can add up. It's a little bit expensive. And then, the factor of, are they accurate? So ovulation literally cannot be predicted. That the name itself, ovulation predictor kits, is inaccurate. What they can is let you know when there's been a surge in the body of a certain hormone that happens, the LH surge that happens with ovulation. But that doesn't mean that they're completely reliable. So the only 100% way for a woman to know when she's ovulating is if she's hooked up to an ultrasound for 3 days, and the ultrasound shows the exact moment of when the egg leaves the ovary. And that in itself is the moment of ovulation. So what the strips kind of help women know is, did you most likely ovulate in the last few hours? So it's more like retroactive information instead of this is about to happen. But it's more like this most likely just happened in the last 24 hours. Could have been 4 hours ago. It could have been, 24 hours ago. So, but that does allow women another day to 2 days where the egg can still be alive and waiting to be fertilized to plan intercourse. But it's not super helpful, because for women who are trying to really target it and they're just relying on those strips, then they may have missed the days leading up to ovulation to use to also try to help cause enough sperm to be in the body that when the ovary does ovulate, there'll actually be tons of sperm ready to go up to the egg. So they are really helpful for women who are doing IVF or IUI procedures in coordination with the fertility awareness method, but used alone can be confusing. And sometimes there's a lot of instances where OPKs can have false readings. And so being in touch with a fertility coach while using them and be like, okay, I saw this. This is what my chart's doing. And this is what my strip said. Can you explain it? Or is there any reason this would be false? Then a coach such as myself can shoot you a quick email back and kind of help you center again and feel like you are understanding what's going on.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, Justina, tell us about, like, okay, if people are totally intrigued after this conversation, what's the best way for them to get started? I know that you teach classes virtually as well as in person here in the Denver area. So can you just elaborate on like good first steps and places to start?
Yeah, absolutely. The first step I would say is to go to my website just to get more information about this method. Or if you have a partner who's like, what is this? They can read my website too. And that's JustinaThompson.com. Then a next step after that would be to sign up for one of my classes. So like you mentioned, locally, one of the main hubs that I teach classes at is Mountain Midwifery Center. I also teach at Kendara every now and then in Boulder. And online, I offer classes every other month for birth control to people around the world. So anyone who has a microphone and a video with their computer, whether you're in another country, which we've had several clients from other countries join in with people on their computer in Denver or people on their computer in California, you get to take this class. And I do 2-part workshops when it's for birth control. And it's always a week apart. So I have my next online webinar is the last 2 Thursdays of February, and registration is open for that. So I offer those as a big package deal where you also get your own guidebook. So the other popular book that people might read and find online is called Taking Charge of Your Fertility. But as you can see, it's literally the Bible of fertility awareness. So when you take a workshop, one of the huge benefits is getting that information processed immediately. And I offer this nice guidebook so that this can be a quick reference for everything you need to know without having to flip through a Bible to get to that information. And then my website, I keep it updated with when the upcoming classes are. You can join my email list to get the latest updates. You can also pre-register for the workshops online as well. It's
Sorry.
You're just trying to keep me on my toes.
I know. Well, so what about women who are ready to get pregnant? Or, I mean, would it still be appropriate for them to take your kind of starting out webinar and just using the same principles for different end goal?
That's a great question. So every now and then I teach workshops for people who want to get pregnant, but I have found that my one-on-one consultation called Let's Make a Baby is way more comprehensive and helpful for a couple to get the one-on-one. It's an 1.5-hour consultation, and they get to learn how to chart their fertility signs so that they know when to get pregnant, and the nutritional plan that's recommended for preparing for pregnancy and during pregnancy, as well as a lot more information about how to prepare the body naturally for men as well as women, because men are contributing to that process as well. Their nutrient levels matter as well. Their lifestyle matters as well. To help make sperm as healthy as possible, and for women to help make the egg as healthy as possible, to help everything come together. And so that's something that I do one-on-one in person or on Skype or Google Hangouts like this, if someone's not local. And that also is a service that is on my website to view and sign up for.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. Thanks for differentiating that, because I think, even though FAM is like your umbrella, or whatever, and, works for a lot of different populations, sometimes we're really focused on our goal, are we trying to get pregnant or are we trying to not get pregnant? So exactly. That's great. Okay. Well, we will definitely email out to everybody all of your info, Justina, and how they can get in touch. And especially since one of your webinars is coming up just in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So that would be a great opportunity to kind of learn more about you and FAM and how they can kind of, take charge, right? I own the Bible, and mine is full of Post-it notes because like it's hard to navigate what sections you need to reference. But yeah, this has been so helpful and great information. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. I'm so glad that I got to hang out with you, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.